Oh, gosh, it's cold. This is about to start. 1 minute to go. I'm going to try something different tonight. I'm actually going to try and change the theme a little bit, and instead of just well, there's no one watching, so there's not much point in making a comment at the moment. Right, okay. So I've got an idea that what I'd like to do is try something a little bit different. And I just think it would be quite useful when the program shows various phone-ins and phone calls and the topic, that either at the beginning or the end of it, each one of the phone calls, we pause, and it gives the viewers a chance to maybe make a comment about what they think about the conversation in the call. If we can do that, it means that we get a bit more interaction, and maybe people might find that a bit more interesting. Although, as I've said before on previous live streams, the aim fundamentally of these live streams is actually for my students. And most of them are going to be going to bed at this time, so they end up watching it during the week. But we'll see. Here we go. I am freezing. But moving on from that.
So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder.
So if I just pause mute the sound for a second. So again, the idea is that maybe what we'll try tonight is after each phone call, when they're kind of rounding up, I'll give an option to pause it, and then we can basically, anybody that wants to make a comment in the live chat can do so, and then we can move on so that we can interact with the show as well. Might be interesting, might not be, but you don't try, you don't find out.
The proposition to revoke the camping ban or reinstate the camping ban passed, which means now Austin's going to have to deal with a massive homeless problem where they decided to reinstate the ban without a plan. So we'll see what happens here in Austin. Hopefully we're still dealing with pandemics, but maybe the humanist organizations and stuff can work to help the city get out of this mess that we're in. But that's not why we're here today. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm Matt Dillon. Joining me this week, my friend Dave Warnock. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Matt. Good to see you again, buddy.
Yeah, I'm going to get through these announcements, and then I guess we're just going to jump in and start taking calls. But if you're watching us live right now on YouTube, directly down below the chat is a link where you can donate. Your donations go directly to the ACA. And then I guess we're just going to jump in and start right now on YouTube. Directly down below the chat is a link where you can donate. Your donations go directly to the ACA. They don't stop and pay a fine at Go, or otherwise known as Google and YouTube, who own all this. It goes to us entirely to support all the efforts that we do at the Atheist Experience Network, including this show, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, nonprofits, etc. You can also become a member at YouTube, which will get you fancy little icons and things like that next to your name, or you can go to patreon.com/The Atheist Experience and join there as well.
Just going to pause there, and if you want to do that and you're in America, of course, you can always use Amazon. They've got the that sort of charitable giving aspect to link to your account on Amazon, so that every time you purchase something, a proportion of money goes to the ACA. I'm based in the UK. It doesn't work for a charity in America. I've tried repeatedly, including with arguments with Amazon, which is unusual because actually I quite like Amazon. and they won't do it. So I give my money in this country to Alzheimer's charity.
Then there are a couple of Facebook pages we want to tell everybody about. The Atheist Experience
okay, this is
Facebook
promo
group.
stuff. I'm going to shoot forward, but I'll put it.
There you go. There's the
details.
link to all that. We're here. Well, I'm here in Austin, but Dave's not. And here's a whole bunch of other people who may or may not be in Austin, our amazing crew who work behind the scenes and tell me when I'm screwing stuff up and when I'm not. And so, yes, they're all, okay, some of them are waving, some of them are on talking to callers. If you're a caller trying to get through, please remember, theists will always have priority on the Atheist Experience. And so when we put out the call saying, hey, we're getting ready to go live, if you would like you to tell us what you believe and why, if you're a theist and you have questions about atheism, if you think you can prove God, if you think you can prove something specific about your religion, by all means, call in. I'll be the first to admit, it's probably not going to go that well for you. But that's because there are thousands of years where you guys have not been able to meet the burden of proof and demonstrate the truth of your claims.
That doesn't mean don't try.
But I'm hoping that we can have more and more, decent conversations and hold off. And what that requires in particular is listening, not being freaked out by an interruption, because there's a delay here and I want to make sure we're defining terms, but making sure that you listen, because if I ask a question or Dave asks a question, you may think it's a trick question or it's a leading question or whatever, but there's a reason that we're asking that. And if you just go right along with it, there'll be a lot less kind of headbutting. So thank you everybody for tuning in this week. Dave, how are you feeling, my friend?
Well, I'm feeling okay. I've just, I've still got this fucking ALS, and it's, I've taken my strength from my arms, but other than that, I feel pretty good. Yeah.
It's one of the concerns that I had. We're looking at a possible touchscreen so that you can steer with the call-in studio stuff. But I am thrilled really to have you.
Thank you, man. I love doing the show, and I've connected with so many people around the world that have seen me on this show, and I have several people in my life that I know that are friends that tell me that this show helped them deconstruct their faith and find freedom from religion and come to understand the world in a better way. And so it's just it's always good to be here and be a part of what you guys are doing.
Well, you are a part of it now, and it's not a part of what you guys are doing. You're a part of us. So
I appreciate that.
Dave is now officially a co-host of the Atheist Experience, and we'll have him on as frequently as our schedule and his schedule permits, and his health permits as well. But yeah, that's where we are now. So in addition to having to put up with me and having to put up with Jenna and Shannon and Jim, you're going to have to put up with Dave now too. So hopefully this will go well. You ready to take some calls, buddy?
Let's do it.
All right. First up to bat, and thank you for patiently waiting and calling in earlier. We've got Dean in California. How are you, Dean?
Hello. I prefer to consider myself to be the person on the mound instead of batting. I'm more of a fan of Koufax and Kershaw, but the reason why I called is I want to present an argument that the notion that someone deserves to go to hell is incoherent, and as for shorthand, then hell here refers to eternal conscious torment. The first part is some people try to justify hell based upon some sort of intuition. Go on.
Can you take a breath real quick? Because I'm confused.
Yeah.
So you're calling a bunch of atheists to tell them that you think it's contradictory to say that somebody deserves to go to hell.
Yes, I think it's large. Go on.
I'm confused as to why we would need to address it.
Yeah, the question is why it should be addressed is because the notion that people deserve to go to hell is fairly common within the world, and it'll probably be an interesting philosophical exercise to sort of explore alternative distribution of punishment and reward in the afterlife.
Except that Dave and I don't think anybody's going to hell. We don't think threats of hell are real. No, seems like the people you need to take this up with are Christians.
Yeah, you'd be preaching to the choir here. We don't subscribe to an afterlife. Neither Matt nor I would subscribe to the idea that there's an afterlife of any sort, that there's some kind of eternal punishment, whether it's hellfire and brimstone or separation from God or eternal darkness. That's just nothing that's on our radar. We don't eternal darkness. That's just nothing that's on our radar. We don't care. I mean, I don't know why, like Matt, I'm confused. What's your point?
Yeah, you're kind of calling to argue a doctrinal view with people who don't accept any of the doctrine at all. And I'm wondering why you're calling us instead of like some Christian show to argue the doctrine.
Well, I mean, I just thought it would sort of be interesting. I mean, because many people in your show usually struggle with the notion of hell, and as a person who studied philosophy of religion, I think I could sort of make a clear argument of what a different conception of why the notion of hell is sort of incoherent, even if you accept traditional assumptions about God's grace, such as one argument, for instance, is that I would argue that in order for God to be sovereign, in order to get a positive state in the afterlife, to go to heaven or go to Jannah, it cannot be based upon your works. It has to be based upon God's determination, His will. But of course, if you argue that, for instance, if you argue that that no one deserves to go to heaven or whatever, you could also make a similar argument that no one deserves to go to hell too.
Yeah, I'm bored out of my skull, and I'll tell you why. I don't have any belief in a hell, but if you're going to try and argue, if, for example, anybody who accepts the Bible, they're going to say it doesn't matter what you think is incoherent because God said, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God," and the
Romans 3:23.
Yeah, and so this notion that man brought sin into the world and God's punishment is hell. That's something you need to take up with the people who have the doctrine, because we don't have any of that. And this is like, you might as well be arguing whether or not predestination is reasonable, or whether or not substitutionary atonement is reasonable. I already reject all of them, so there's no reason for us to talk about it.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay then. Well, unfortunately, this. Well,
hey, good luck, man. Maybe you'll find a theist. Go to a church and argue with them about it. But I'm going to move on to some other callers. But thanks, Dean.
Okay.
Yeah.
My!
It's like
right out of the gate. What the hell? Metaphorically speaking, what the hell?
It's also kind of I want to make the case that the threatening people with hell is incoherent. Well, first of all, it's not incoherent. I mean, just linguistically, it's a threat, but it's not like it doesn't make sense.
I'm going to pause there for a second. I don't know whether anybody that's listening might want to make a comment there. The idea that is it worth having a conversation about the concept of hell if you don't believe in hell? I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what the main point of that would be. This is a moment where if anybody that's watching wants to chip in, or maybe if you're watching this after the show, you can make a comment in the comments bit. What is the point of phoning up genuinely, as Matt said? What's the point of phoning up an atheist show to explain why the idea of hell is sort of ridiculous to a bunch of people who don't believe in it? Because they already, I suppose, effectively by definition, don't believe in it. I'm not quite sure that I follow the logic there of the point, really. Anybody can, It's kind of like saying, what would it be in... I play Dungeons and Dragons, which is a game that is absolutely amazing. If you've never played it, then you're actually starting to be one of the sort of... one of the people in the world that has never actually met it, because it's becoming more and more and more and more popular. It is the most amazing game for lots and lots of reasons. This is not a promo for D&D, although it can come over that way. And at a time when everybody knows, I think, and we become more and more familiar with the ideas that mental health is really important, not just for young people, but for everybody. Something like Dungeons and Dragons has been shown to have significant influences on helping to deal with, mental stress. It's certainly escapism from the world, which is most of the time is a good thing, and it's controlled escapism, and it's a safe space to talk about anything, because you can always, you know, when I run a game, there's a place called Thay, and if you go there, you're either a slave or you're killed. There's kind of like it's a very binary place. You're either purebred Thay or you're in trouble, unless you are invited. And that allows you to talk about all sorts of isms, and you do it in a safe space where, you know, you can talk about whether you agree or disagree, but it's your character that agrees or disagrees. So you can actually have conversations about quite deep things and keep it light, because it's within a fantasy world. And you know, I could say that there's something called a Feywild, which is like an alternative reality. I could say that exists, or I could say, actually, I want to have a conversation with you about why it doesn't exist. What would be the point when most people, if not everybody, would accept the fact it doesn't actually exist? Anyway, let's move on. There's no chat comments, so I'll move on.
It's a threat to control people, and like you said, why didn't you tell it? And let's argue whether the rapture is post-trib or pre-trib. I mean, let's just talk about that. If we're going to, same thing. I mean, we don't care.
Forward a little bit.
I mean, that's why I went.
Jesus, man.
Canada has a question about evidence. So welcome, Frank. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, Matt. Great to be on your show, and thank you for accepting my call.
Sure.
I'm a Byzantine Catholic who's followed your work for a few years. I've seen you live in Toronto, which was a real fun experience.
Oh, the one with Peterson?
Yeah, the one with Peterson, yeah. A good friend of mine gave me tickets to the front row. That was pretty awesome.
Sweet.
I thought you did very well.
Thank you.
For sure. Recently, you had what I would consider to be a productive debate with Trent Horn concerning the resurrection, and I wanted to address some of your critiques.
Oh, gosh, no. It was not a productive debate. It was shocking. It was a debate on a Catholic channel, YouTube channel. If I remember, I'll shove the link in the comments. It was a man and boys moment. It was just awful. The arguments from the Catholicist side were just, I'm really sorry, they were stunningly weak. I'm not saying that every argument is always stunningly weak from the religious side. That's not what I mean. But this particular, I think it was 2 hours, 10 minutes, which I put myself through. And I mean, Matt actually was really good, but the counter arguments were shocking. But you don't have to take my word for it, of course. You can go and watch it. Again, if I remember, I'll shove the link in the bottom. You'll probably see some of my comments as well.
The evidence that Trent provided. I'd like to explore how some of your standards of evidence and your associated critique of the historical method make it practically impossible to create a reasonable case for the resurrection under the best of hypothetical circumstances. Obviously, you could tell I'm reading off here. If you don't mind, I'd like to maybe continue just a little bit. It's not much longer to go. But yeah, you indicated that there's two categories of evidence that we would use to evaluate a claim from the past. Me and Trent both agree with that. We're looking at testimonials and physical evidence at this point. And so when asked what it would take for the claim to be considered reasonable, you said you don't know, but that you questioned the quantity and quality of the physical and testimonial evidence that was provided. So what I wanted to do is maybe go through some examples of ideal testimonial and ideal physical evidence and determine whether or not those would be sufficient to reasonably believe in a resurrection. Is that something?
I just like to say, I don't know where this is going to go, obviously, because it's live, or, well, you know, it's like 2 minutes delayed now. But I do know from my own experience that when I talk to theists, one of the big issues that comes up is what is a fact? And interestingly, my definition of a fact seems to agree with all the dictionaries, but Christians, for example, don't like that, so they have to invent their own definition of fact, which I actually have no idea what it is, and evidence.
No.
Is appropriate, and you go through some examples of ideal testimonial and ideal physical evidence and determine whether or not those would be sufficient to reasonably believe in a resurrection. Is that something that is appropriate, and do you think I've misrepresented your view here?
So first of all, I just posted a debate review of this to show that Trent's claims Trent's claims don't even meet Trent's standards. Trent came up with a 3-prong test for what is unreasonable, and his claims actually fail on all 3 prongs. No amount of testimony is going to be enough for me to accept a resurrection. You would
Correct.
need physical evidence for that. So now the thing is, when you say that, hang on, when you
I can chip in here for anybody that's listening about one of the things that Trent said. One of the things that Trent said was that there could be testimonials from a doctor. The idea that someone was dead and then they were kind of alive, and the idea was that, well, you know, when a doctor says this, that's a testimonial. So if you're going to accept testimonial from like a doctor, as in like today, that they were dead and then they were alive, not that I think doctors do say that. Why won't you take a testimonial like the Bible from 2,000 years ago? It's the time span actually is important, but a Christian needs that not to be. But that's not, when a doctor makes a comment about the fact that someone is dead today, that is not a testimonial in the sense that they're looking at a situation and they're giving their opinion, you know, just by looking at it. When a doctor diagnoses someone as dead, it is based on the evidence from a whole bunch of metrics, from instruments that are connected to the person. It's not just, well, I'm looking at him and it looks like he's dead. There's a whole bunch of instrumentation that give a doctor can't just call someone as dead. It just doesn't work like that.
say that my standards would make it practically impossible to prove a resurrection, my response to that is tough shit. It's not the fault of the standard that the claim can't live up to it. If the standard is correct and we should only believe things when there's really good evidence for it, then that's an admission that you don't have really good evidence for the claim.
I agree with pretty much everything you said there, and so I think it's safe to say. So there was a point in the evidence where you critique the quality of the testimonial evidence, but if the quality of the testimonial evidence was perfect, let's say we had like Pontius Pilate providing a first-hand account claim that he says he saw the resurrection, for example, that would still be suspect to numerous amount of critique and questioning. That wouldn't be sufficient in your view to believe in the resurrection. I think that's fair and consistent with your worldview. So that only
it'd be better though.
Evidence.
I would agree it would be better.
Yeah, I okay, that's good. And
you know what else? You know what else would be better? You know what else would be better?
Yeah, you did provide a third example, which we would like to get to later. But go.
But what would be really ideal is if Jesus showed up. That'd be fucking awesome. Yeah. Because if he's resurrected and if he's still alive, then how much of a monster does he have to be to let us sit around and argue and nitpick over evidence and damn people to hell instead of just showing up and presenting undeniable
throw in
evidence?
thousands of deaths as well along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's a super fair claim. It's essentially the hidden God critique, and I think that's fully reasonable. I would like to address that maybe after we deal with the physical piece, because I think we both agree only evidence would not be sufficient in and of itself. It maybe helps with a degree of certitude somewhere, but not enough to say certainty for sure, or reasonable.
My confidence in direct eyewitness testimony is going to be slightly more than it is in hearsay. And the biggest problem that we have with everything related to the Bible is it's all hearsay, and it's something you can't investigate, and you can't even identify necessarily who's writing. I mean, yeah, we can be pretty confident that Paul wrote a good chunk of the things that are attributed to him, but we also know that there are forgeries there for Paul. So what's the physical evidence? Because I don't want Dave to fall asleep here.
Okay, yeah, sure. So if we move to physical evidence of the resurrection, my question for you would be, what kind of physical evidence could you possibly have for a resurrection event? And then I would like to maybe point out some evidence you could have for something like a crucifixion, which is not that difficult to ascertain that would be a lot more probable than a resurrection, obviously. But let's imagine. So for a resurrection, I can't possibly fathom a physical piece of evidence you could have for such an event. I don't know if you could provide one, then I'd like to move on.
The person being alive, like Matt said, the person showing up and saying, hey, I was dead, now I'm alive. Take some video. We have video cameras in our pockets now. Why can't he do that?
Not the least of which is that providing good, independently verified medical evidence before And during the period of dead and after would be
Right.
physical evidence that's leaps and
There
bounds
were
beyond anything we've done.
historians in those times as well.
Okay.
So,
Would that not be? Okay, that would be a combination of testimonial and physical, I suppose. But in terms of
Well,
like,
no, so
real
if you go down that path, what you're then doing is saying that all evidence is testimonial unless you gathered the evidence yourself. And that's not the way standards of evidence works. As long as there's a reasonable chain of custody, as long as we have good methods to verify the physical facts, then it's like when somebody comes in and reports on what my blood glucose level is. If I tell them after I've tested it, they're not testifying as if their testimony is confirmation of my glucose levels. They are testifying that I told them my glucose levels based on an actual test. It is the test that is the physical evidence for that.
Absolutely, and I think that's reasonable. And I think we both agree that standard of methodology doesn't exist in the ancient world.
Yep.
So let's say that's begging for something. But
Well,
let's say like sorry, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to say something, but you mentioned it, the ancient world. Let's back up a minute for this whole thing. Matt's right. I do get bored with these conversations about proving the resurrection and proving this and proving that. Let's back up and look at the big picture. Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus supposedly is the most important factor within Christianity, the death and resurrection. As Paul said, if Christ be not raised from the dead, then our faith is in vain. So if that's the case, if all of humanity, if the future of humanity and people's lives, eternal destiny depended upon this act and belief in that act, doesn't it stand to reason that the God of the universe, with all options at his disposal, could have done this in a way that was a lot more clear than it has been? We're still arguing about this 2,000 years later. God could have done this at a time when people were literate. He could have commanded them to take notes. He could have waited till there were video cameras everywhere, that he could have had evidence. If God really wanted man to know the truth about his son, Jesus, and the resurrection, it seems to me there are hundreds of better ways he could have done it. Now, I've been told you can't question God's ways. God chooses what he wants to do and when he wants to do it. But I'm telling you, the way that he did this with Jesus and the resurrection is just about as poor a job as I could think of to do it. And here we are arguing about it 2,000 years later. Are you kidding me?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm not going to kind of rehash some of the parts that Trent and Matt discussed. And I'm sure he's gone through that debate like a million times to try to express why the hidden God situation is occurring. But I do want to, if you don't mind, I would want to continue.
poor old Dave, he's just done that really heartfelt and frankly
Okay,
not
we can go a little further. But my first question is, what physical evidence do you have for the resurrection? Because I'm not aware of any.
I have none, and like I mentioned, I can't foresee there being any. My critique is you shouldn't ask for it if theoretically it would be an impossibility to provide it.
No, sir, that's ridiculous.
Just
that's what Matt said.
Just because I don't have a time machine doesn't mean that I can't have good standards of evidence related to the past. You don't have to have perfect. All I'm saying is better. But at a minimum, you are.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I know you want better. We can't get to a degree of certainty, but if I could just provide more testimony, which is what.
No. The truth is not impacted in any way by the number of people who believe it. The plural of anecdote is not data. You can line up as many testimonies as you want, and it doesn't increase the plausibility of the claim. Then why, if you agree, why after admitting you don't have physical evidence, why would you complain that asking for physical evidence is a problem? It's not my problem. It's fucking God's problem to plant us in a universe where we use our brains. And if we want to have the best understanding of the universe, we set up methodologies that keep us from being fooled and conned as best we can. We'll never be perfect. And the God of the universe has utterly failed to provide sufficient evidence for the single most important event in history, and you're somehow suggesting that it's my fault for having a standard of evidence. It's just too damn difficult for God.
No, I'm just saying that we shouldn't, like, if you know that the evidence is not there, like theoretically, the evidence wouldn't be there for a physical proof of the resurrection.
Okay, right. I want to chip in here for a second, but there is another issue here. The situation with Jesus, and if I just expand this slightly, just take an even bigger issue of whether Jesus actually existed, not the concept that, you know, that Jeshua was like a name that people had in those days, because certainly there would have been people called that, but the fact that all of the things that were said to have happened in the Bible actually happened to a person. The evidence that lot happened is almost zero. If you remove the Bible, there's virtually nothing, and almost everything that does exist outside of the Bible, a huge amount of it has been shown to be false, to be a lie, to be made up, to be a creation, to be an addition to another book, like the Josephus stuff. And so you could say, well, okay, it's 2,000 years ago, so how could we ever know whether anybody was around 2000? How do we know that Julius Caesar actually existed? But the point is that there were multiple historians who would talk about Julius Caesar. There was coins minted. There were people on the different sides who were historians who referred to things that happened that involved him. So there were historians on the pro and the con side that would have referenced Julius Caesar. But there is none of that with Jesus. So it isn't fair to say that it's 2,000 years ago. We can't interrogate anybody now. So actually, let's just not bother with that question, because you can't do it anyway. Well, yeah, okay, you can't get positive proof, but there's a huge amount of evidence for many of the people from that time that actually did exist, as far as we can tell, just based on the weight of the probability of the number of people from sort of disparate backgrounds that would comment on them in their writings. Well, there isn't that for Jesus. I mean, it's a real issue. This did Jesus exist? Never mind all the other things, the miracles that happened.
It's just, I don't know why it wouldn't be there for a physical proof of the resurrection. It's just, I don't know why we would ask for it, right? If it's like theoretically impossible.
I'm asking for it because there are people who think there is physical evidence. Not everybody's as reasonable as you. I ask for it to get the admission, because when you admit that you don't have physical evidence for something, that means that you, like Trent, are willing to accept that a resurrection occurred based on testimony, and I'm not.
Right. Yeah, and that's fair, and that's where the debate had ended, and I think that's absolutely fair. I do want to, so the hidden God thing you had mentioned, if God maybe put you in a time portal, you could go back, witness the resurrection, and then come back, and then that would be potentially an option for some form of evidentiary demonstration of this particular event. But I think it's fair to say,
or he could have done it now. He could have done it now.
Doing it now is definitely the foolproof method. But so let's.
Well, if it's that important, why the hell wouldn't he do it? If it's that, I mean, Frank, you didn't
see
even
that?
address what I said. If it's that important, why wouldn't God come down and settle this right now? People's lives depend on it. Destinies, eternal destinies depend on this. Why wouldn't God settle this?
I think. Yeah, there's a number of commentaries on this specific point concerning our ability to really. Yeah,
are any of them particularly good? Do any of them make the resurrection suddenly reasonable to believe?
Not given the criteria you've provided, no.
Yeah, not given the criteria that Trent provided. Trent provided a 3-prong test, and his own claim fails all 3 prongs.
Yeah, I guess my only concern was that during the debate, it appeared that you were indicating that if there was sufficient testimony and sufficient physical evidence, that it may be possible, but the testimony is not sufficient, and the physical evidence is such that it will require a medical document review for which a process did not exist. So ultimately, what would be required would be a God of the gaps type event where something unexplainable by science occurs today, and that everybody witnesses it unanimously. Because there was an instance where you, in the call with Trent, indicated that if the entire world had a testimonial account of some event like the one you're describing here, where God teleports them and does whatever, and that you did not witness it or was able to testably prove it, that you would not believe in it, which is intellectually consistent with your axioms, but that even that's
not entirely accurate. So I'm still hearing myself a bit. I don't know if it's on your end or not, Frank, but my position is that I don't know whether or not I would believe it. It's if everybody on the planet had an experience and relayed reliably all the same information to me, I would not have sufficient reason to believe their claim, but I would have sufficient reason to believe that they were all conveying something that they truly experienced. I don't have to, like, it's not that we throw out all testimony as if it's garbage. It's just, what is it sufficient to demonstrate? And when we have no examples of confirmed resurrections, not one. It's not like, hey, we don't have evidence for Jesus, but we had good evidence for Lazarus, or this, this resurrection that took place in Africa a couple months ago. We have no good evidence to confirm any resurrection. And now we're saying that here's one that took place a couple thousand years ago, and we can't prove it, but you need to believe this, or you're going to burn forever or be annihilated, or whatever the thing is. That basically everything that's important rests on this. I find a God that failed so miserably to safeguard the most important fact in the universe. I find him pathetic and undeserving of my attention or respect or admiration.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Though, as a Catholic, we wouldn't believe that it's just that lack of that knowledge would damn you or anything like that. But so I guess we've come to the terminus of the call. I just wanted to confirm whether or not, what you felt on about testimonial evidence, what type of physical evidence would be necessary, and then just about some specific apparition that Jesus would take place in the modern day. I just want to leave you with maybe a logical syllogism that I came up with, dude, from your college friend. You said that science is knowledge. Then you said history is not science. Therefore, a conclusion of the prior premises is that history has no knowledge.
Yes.
And I think that's, your discounting of testimony is reasonable given your presuppositions. It's just something that, as someone who studies history, it's something that I would disagree with you on, and that's why the testimony is higher, has a higher weight for me than you do, and I think that's fine. It's just a disagreement of how we weigh the evidence. But I do appreciate your call. I think it was very respectful, and hope that you continue to have conversations with Catholic callers.
I will, and I'll probably be having one with Trent at some point. And also, I got a nice thing. I'm going to let you go, Frank, but I'll talk about this real quick. But thank you for the call.
Sounds good. Yeah, cheers.
So somebody else who saw the show or saw that debate, I'm going to make sure I don't show their name, but they sent me a nice card. I posted a video on my Atheist Debates project about this, but the card includes not only a picture of the Virgin Mary and everything, but a whole bunch of, like, I feel like I won the Catholic Pokemon, collect them all, Saints cards. I mean, there's probably 30, 40 of them in here. I talked a little bit about this in a recent video called Skeptical of Catholicism. So I appreciate the calls and everybody, but yeah, I mean, if you're going to admit, hey,
so you got all the saints. You got all the saints now. You got a deck of saints cards. Is that
who knows how many there are? But
You
yeah.
can do magic Christology.
He was saying that he's going to puppy last night. Thing that anyone.
Yeah.
But we have some people who think they can. So Stephen in Colorado, who's a deist, I think he's claiming to have empirical evidence for a creator. Welcome, Stephen. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm fine. How about you?
Not too bad. Was I correct that you have evidence for a creator?
Yes, I do. I have evidence, but it's not physical evidence. It is empiricism. So I do have evidence based off of sense perception. So we're all creators. And because we are all creators, I know that there is a creator.
I'm sorry, but
I'm sure
that doesn't logically follow, because you could also say we're all humans, and therefore the creator is a human.
That doesn't logically follow.
I know, that's what I just told you. It doesn't logically follow.
Yeah.
You can't say that because you cannot argue that because all of us people here are creators of something, that therefore there is a creator of everything. That is simply a non sequitur.
Yes, but I reject that. Of course, we disagree.
Okay. Well, I don't care if you reject it. It's a fallacy. And so if you're not going to come with an argument that isn't fallacious, I'm just going to move on to somebody else.
Sorry. I kind of muted myself. My apologies. Sometimes when the people call in to these shows, Matt will cut them off. I'm kind of repeating myself slightly here now. Matt will cut them off and kind of close down the conversation. And it's not because he's trying to avoid the conversation. It's because it's not going to go anywhere. If it's based on a fallacy, there's no point, because it just isn't going to go anywhere. And there's lots of people who are calling to get in. So that's why he does that, and people need to realize that it's not because he's trying to be a dick or anything.
So how do you have an argument?
If you reject it, it's a fallacy. And so if you're not going to come with an argument that isn't fallacious, I'm just going to move on to somebody else.
So how do you have an argument if you're just creating rebuttals? We can't actually have a discussion.
Ooh, that so reminds me that. So how do we have an argument? There's a Monty Python sketch. If you haven't seen it, there's a Monty Python sketch about wanting an argument. A guy goes to this kind of office, and you go to this office to have an argument, and the point is not to have an argument. It's to have a discussion about what you believe and why you believe it. It's not to have an argument. You can have an argument by arguing with somebody about something, and basically your position is completely untenable and ridiculous. But you're going to argue the case, and they're going to argue about that you're being ridiculous, and you're going to try and argue, no, I'm not. Well, that's not really useful.
No, I'm happy to have a discussion, but not once you've started with an argument that is fallacious. If I point out the fallacy, it's now a waste of time to continue talking about that argument. You need to come back with something that's not fallacious.
Sorry, I won't be muted again.
Flat earthers call things fallacious all the time.
I'm okay. I don't know how that's relevant. I don't care what flat earthers say. I've identified the fallacy in your argument. Go fix it and come back some other time.
It's not a fallacy.
It is a fallacy. Congratulations.
One of the shortest calls ever. Oh my God. I just disagree with you, Matt. So There's always somebody wanting to prove.
Because yes, I've already said before, if in fact there is a God and that God is, well, a moral monster or whatever else, I will believe that the God exists, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to worship or adhere to that God.
Right.
You know, but at a minimum, if somebody proved that there was a God, I would no longer be an atheist. I just wouldn't be a follower of that God. I would be like, yep, there's a
Exactly.
God, but I'm not a follower of that
Big deal.
God because that God's a jackass. But also this whole notion of, you know, like worship and reverence, I don't think anything that is deserving, truly deserving of reverence could ever demand it. I think the instant you demand or expect reverence, that's the instant that you are no longer deserving of it. It's like, you know, it's like being, I won't use the K name just because I have friends who use that name, but the obnoxious, you know, let me talk to your manager people, that sort of entitlement is a big problem. And so when you're looking at it in the context of these discussions to say, well, I'm entitled to this, or I'm entitled, it doesn't make any sense. But when you talk about, hey, here's this notion that there's a God that exists. If there's a God that exists, I want to know it. But I'm just not going to accept testimony and fallacious arguments. But we'll see, because I think this caller here is going to try and correct me on something else. So David in Georgia wants to know if atheists seem hypocritical since they require evidence from others but not from themselves. How you doing, David?
Oh, boy.
Hey, how's it going?
I'd like to correct you because I require evidence from anybody who's making a claim, whether they're atheist or not. So it's nothing hypocritical here, but go ahead and make your case.
Well, what I don't understand about the atheists is like I said, they require evidence to evaluate it, but they hold a position that they can't show evidence for.
No, they don't.
What's the position?
Position that they can.
What position do we hold that we don't have evidence for?
Yeah, what's our position, David?
I'm not sure if there is, or I haven't seen evidence. So
I'm not
basically arguing from a point of I don't know.
That's not a claim.
That's not my position. Is I don't know. If I don't know, then I don't know. That's the only right answer. I'm not arguing from a lack of evidence for a position that requires evidence. If I don't know whether it's true or not, that's because there's insufficient evidence to reach a conclusion.
But what I'm saying is you can't even provide evidence that you don't know.
Yes, I can.
Well,
I'm telling you I
sense.
don't know. Never mind, David. You're not serious.
That makes no sense. That makes no sense.
Hey,
I know you're not wasting Dave's time on Dave's first day by suggesting that I can't provide evidence that I don't believe something. You can't provide evidence that vanilla is your favorite fucking ice cream either, but I didn't call your show and waste your time with it.
I think it's a common misunderstanding among many people that they think as atheists, we're claiming there's no God. We're saying definitely there's no God. And there may be some atheists that say that, but that's not my position. I'm simply saying I don't see evidence for the God that you claim there is. Yeah. That's not a claim. That requires no evidence or no backing up of any kind. It's just like, no, I don't see it. Show me.
I would have been happy to take a call like that, but a call that tries to play this little word game of you can't provide evidence that you don't believe something. Well, congratulations, neither can you. So piss off.
Oh my God!
If you're not going to take this seriously, now look, I want theists to call in, and I like them to defend what they believe or ask whatever questions. But if you're just calling in because you want to hear yourself on a show, okay, you'll probably get through, and you'll probably hear yourself once, but that's it. You can't provide evidence.
Hey, you know what, Matt? I think there's some people out there that they derive some perverse pleasure about getting hung up on by Matt Dillahunty. I think there's people that want to get hung up on.
That's probably
snake. That's
right. How you doing? Welcome to Atheist Experience with Dave and Matt. How are you?
Oh, CJ.
Yeah. Hey. You guys are going to outer darkness. You guys are going to be tortured and burned up, and disease will cover your body.
How do you know that?
Okay. Because outer darkness is a giant snake that circles the earth.
How do you know that? What are you talking about? You making shit up?
No, I'm not making shit up. You want to see it? There's a giant snake that circles the earth, and when atheists die, they get put in there to be tortured by Jesus Christ, basically.
We get put into a snake by Jesus.
Yeah.
How would you prove that?
You don't want to believe in him, so he's going to show you inside the snake, which is outer darkness, and you're going to be tortured there.
Okay.
Well, how do you?
So Dave's asked you 3 or 4 times now, how do you know this is true?
Oh, it's on the internet. You want to see it?
On the internet.
On the internet. Okay.
All right.
So
Goodbye,
is
CJ.
QAnon.
CJ's
Good
So
God, where are
big.
these callers coming from today?
Yeah, evidently I'm trying
Holy
to just
shit.
stick with theists who are calling in. So Paul in the
I
UK
just
has
felt like, yeah.
Paul,
it's
Paul, you
always a
there?
worry
You had
when
a
they're
question
from the
about
UK.
the definition of atheism
I
in a
couldn't
cosmological argument or something?
Oh, please.
Yeah,
not.
that's basically it. So one of the callers, I think 2 callers before, said that.
I've heard Paul
actually,
before.
you've said many times that you lack belief in a god/gods. Is
Correct.
that still the case?
Yes, I do not believe in a god or gods. I don't like to say lack because that sounds as if I'm missing something I should have. I'm just saying I am not convinced that there is a god.
Okay. So I think I just wanted to delve deeper into that. There's something that I was thinking about the other day, and obviously a baby would lack belief or would not be convinced of
Correct.
the existence of a god.
Correct.
So it appears to be the fundamental, the default view to have. So, but the thing is, there's a difference between lacking or not being convinced of a god before viewing evidence and
Yes.
after viewing it.
Yes, it's called the difference between implicit atheism and explicit atheism. And so you could say that a baby is an implicit atheist, but in that way, so is a rock. And so it's no point in talking about their atheism. I'm an explicit atheist in the sense that for every God proposition I've been presented with, they have failed to meet their burden of proof, and I still remain unconvinced, but I am at least familiar with the concept. None of this is relevant. It doesn't matter what label you use, and it doesn't matter whether or not babies qualify. At the end of the day, the claim that a God exists has not met its burden of proof, and I remain unconvinced. Are we going to address that?
You there? Paul?
I guess not.
Oh, that was ridiculous.
Did we lose him?
I guess when you don't get the answer you want on definitions,
Well done, Paul. That's.
I wasn't really sure what he
notch
was
for the
trying to
UK.
say at the beginning. Was he saying that we're all atheists until some point God proves himself, or what? I guess I didn't get. Is he there?
no, I already dropped. It have the same position.
heard Matt say, "Hey Matt, hey Dave, how are you guys doing?"
Hey, Armand.
Hey, I've been watching the show for a long time, and I've heard Matt say a lot of times that he isn't absolutely certain about anything. And I
Correct.
just want you to explain why not. Because I'm pretty sure that 1 + 1 = 2.
Yeah, you just said you're pretty sure that 1 + 1 = 2, but you're not absolutely certain, because absolute certainty would require a measuring device that is absolute. Now, we think that reason is absolute, but we can't prove that reason is absolute. So anything that is contingent upon reason it's like you can't have a measurement from a ruler that is more accurate than the divisions on the ruler. And so until you can prove that reason is absolute, all of your positions are they may be maximally in line with reason, but if you can't prove that reason is absolute, then you can't be absolutely certain in that. What you can be is maximally certain or relative certain, within that standard. And so if the standard is reason, but we don't know that reason is absolute, then we can't be absolutely certain about anything we derive from reason.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I can see your point there.
Yeah. It's just as it is. Yeah, no worries. It's a fine point that doesn't make any difference in everyday usage. Because most of the time when you say, hey, I'm absolutely certain that 1 + 1 = 2, I'm not going to say you're not absolutely certain, because I know what you fucking mean. We are all as confident as possible that 1 + 1 = 2 for specific definitions of 1 + = 2.
Not in base 2, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Because if you do 2 + 2 = 4, now you got to. Well, it's contingent on what base you're in.
I think the point is to maintain an open mind, and I had a brief interaction with a TikTok commenter just yesterday, actually, and he basically said, "Yeah, I'm all over everything, Matt. You should do it. You'd crush this shit, man." But listen, this guy said there's no person, book, thing, anything that would convince me God's not real, and I simply said, then you're not open to new information. Your certainty has closed your mind. And anytime, and he said, no, I am. He said you were certain one time, and I said, yeah. The difference is I changed my mind.
Yeah, I realized I was wrong.
Anytime we become certain about any position, then we close our mind to new information and learning and growing, and that's a dangerous place to live in.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's fair.
So,
that's fair.
Thanks for the call, Armand.
I just wanted to say I'm looking forward to hearing from Dave more. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you, Armand. I love being here, man. Thank you for your call.
All right, no problem.
Yeah.
Cheers. All right, Dave. They want to hear more from you.
Yes.
Which is a good thing.
All right.
You're now part of the cast. Here's a name that I don't know how to pronounce. Mr. Delacow? Mr. Delacow? How do you pronounce that?
Monsieur Delicieux. Delicious.
Delicio.
Delicious.
In Canada. Well, welcome to the show. I think you're going to try and make a case that Jesus is God. So take it away.
I'm gonna put your convictions to the test. I have two propositions that will prove in a tangible way that Jesus is God. The Hebrew writer authors claim that the God of the Hebrews makes exclusive claims to the 7-day cycle. That's the first proposition. The second proposition is that the Hebrew writers testified that the God of the Hebrews would prophesy or predict the universal application of the 7-day cycle as a sign of his authority over all the earth. So we can see in Isaiah 66:23, flesh, the remaining of the humans on earth.
Okay, I think part of the argument that he's going to give is that because there's a 7-day cycle, then that proves that there's a God, because God said that he was going to use a 7-day cycle, something along those lines, which is just clearly fallacious.
Will come to worship him. In order for that to take place, he has to first submit all nations to a 7-day cycle. And all nations kept a different cycle to venerate their own gods. So we can see that Jesus, ipso facto, by the law of cause and effect, that he submitted all nations to the 7-day cycle. So
yeah, actually, all of that is nonsense, right down to the ipso facto. First of all, you can't demonstrate that Jesus is real, that he still exists. And the fact that we're on a 7-day cycle goes to the popularity of that, not to the truth of that. But Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, the 7-day cycle, you're talking about that somehow the Hebrew perfect number 7 and the 7-day cycle that we have as a week is somehow proof of God. Is that what you're saying? Did I get that right?
No. Can I repeat myself? First of all, I want to make it clear. Only Israel kept the 7-day cycle. So my point is that they wrote in their scriptures that they would submit all nations to the 7-day cycle. So it was not
I heard thing. No, stop.
Every nation.
Yeah.
No, so we heard that. We understood that.
It's not. We don't care what the scriptures say.
The fact that most of the world uses 7-day cycle does not in any way show that the Hebrew knowledge or their claims about the Christ is true. That's about how popular it became.
You're failing to see my point. The point is that all nations kept a different cycle.
I understand that. Please stop telling, Mr. Delasso, please stop telling me I'm failing to see your point. At some point, nations had different calendars.
So what is my point?
It's your.
So it wasn't popular.
If you'd stop fucking interrupting me, I'd get to it. Are you done with that?
I'm listening. Please.
Okay. Please listen then. At one point, a bunch of nations had different calendars. And so one of them claims that we have a 7-day calendar and we're going to make the world submit to our calendar. And later, we're all on a 7-day calendar. That doesn't prove the truth of their their supernatural claims. It doesn't prove the truth of their God claims. It shows how popular their calendar was and how it was spread to the rest of the world. None of that proves the truth of Jesus.
I understand your point. Just want to make it clear before I go. They predicted the universal application as a sign of authority of the God of the Hebrews.
No. It doesn't matter if they claim it's a sign of authority. It doesn't matter if they claim it's a sign of authority. That doesn't mean it's true.
Okay, so the fact that they predicted it is not
It's not a prediction. If I order my steak medium rare and the waiter brings me a medium rare steak, I didn't predict the future.
No. The fact that every nation, please let me finish my sentence so you understand my point of view.
No, I don't think I'll let you finish any more sentences.
He's just repeating himself. He's clueless. He does not know what he's talking about.
Are you going to answer Dave's question?
What is the question?
How does this prove Jesus?
It doesn't prove Jesus, and you can't use Hebrew prophecies about Jesus to prove Jesus. That's circular reasoning. You can't use the Bible to prove the Bible.
Okay, that is one point. That's a different point. I want to get back to the God of the Hebrews then. I want to make it clear that every nation kept a different cycle to venerate their God.
Jesus fucking Christ. If you are just going to repeat yourself, I'm going to move on to another caller. Either make a new point.
Why do we care? Why do we care what the God of the Hebrews said or did? That's their own idea, and they wrote about that, and I don't care. It doesn't prove shit.
Oh, well, you're submitted to it. You're submitted to the power of his word. That's the point.
God.
I'm not submitted to the power of any word. I'm on a 7-day calendar. I also, you know what Thursday is named after? Thor. Does that mean I'm worshiping Thor? Please stop coming with really bad, stupid arguments.
Thor is not universal.
It's yes.
Oh my God.
Because languages are different in what they call the days, it's only the 7 days that matter. Well, the numbers have different names in different languages too. So checkmate.
So that's like saying because I speak English that I'm submitted to England. I that's the same kind of logic. It makes no sense.
Standardized and
it's
a little silly.
He's been on before, and
we have Ahmed in Ohio has a evidently something I've said has made him more theistic. So how you doing, Ahmed?
Hi, Matt. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Ahmed.
I start listening to you. Hi, sir. How you doing? I started listening to you about a year ago.
Well, then why should I talk to you?
Because
why should I talk to you?
Because I work every Sunday. Why should you talk to me?
I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing.
Go ahead.
You started off the call. If you started off the call basically saying you don't listen anymore. So go ahead.
No, I listen. I've been listening to you. I've been listening every time I
got it. I got it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the joke. Just make the point.
Shouldn't have made the joke.
No, you are fine. English is my second language, and I am very good. I'm not very good at it, so please.
You're way better at it than I am at any other language. Let's just get to the point.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I've been listening to you, and your logic makes sense to me all the time. And I was raised as a Muslim, but you brought few things. It just makes me believe in Islam more and more. One of those things you said many times that if God did not guide me, he have to. If there is a God, he should guide me. But I found this in the Quran very obvious in the story of Abraham when he looked at the sun and he said, "This is my God," and when the sun is gone, he said, "This cannot be my God." And then he looked at the moon, and when the moon is gone, he said, "This cannot be my God because it's come and go." And he said, if there is a God, he should guide me. And the Quran consider that a good argument. So when you bring this argument with your human thinking, it just makes me feel like the Quran is not misleading me.
Except that you're worshiping a God that you can't demonstrate exists. So at least with the sun and the moon, we can see that they're there some of the time. Allah is non-existent as far as we can tell. And so how could you possibly buy into the notion of a God that doesn't demonstrate its existence?
This is a very good question, and it's a big question, and I cannot summarize it in a call. And I have to admit that I'm a Muslim because I was raised as a Muslim, but I have doubted all my life about for a few things, and when I search it, I come back to the Islam, and I found it makes sense to me. That's why I am presenting this to you, because one of the things you said, another example, and I'm not going to the proven God, because that's a big question, and for me to present my case to you, I got to be prepared. This is my only Sunday I am off, and I found you that I can call you, and I am happy to talk to you, because I have a lot of respect to you and to your show, although I disagree with, or we disagree with a lot of things, you know. But the other thing is that you brought in three things you brought in. And when I went and I searched it, it made me more confident of Islam. The story of the Noah and the flood. I went to... Yes, sir.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. The story of the Noah and the flood. And in the Bible and the way you argument, there was no evidence that there is a flood that submerged all the earth and vanish all the human...
Let me cut in here. Ahmed, it sounds like you're saying that because Matt showed you that the Christian God didn't make sense, you reverted back to your Islam God, and you settled on that. It's as though you've made up your mind. You came to this conversation with the understanding that there must be a God, and you have to pick which one. And Matt demonstrated to you that the Christian God doesn't have sufficient evidence, and so you reverted back to the God of your childhood. I'm asking you why you have come to the table with the predetermined idea that there must be a God, and I need to figure out which one to follow. We're saying there's not evidence for any God. Go ahead.
All right. I am not taking Matt is talking or evidence about Christianity as to prove that I'm a Muslim. Most of the stuff that he said about Christianity is been mentioned in the Quran and been mentioned, and I know it. So I know that the Bible is written by human, and there is no. But this is not. So I am talking.
Ahmed, stop. For clarity,
yes,
it seems to both me and Dave that you said you heard me debunk the Noah and the flood story, and this made you more confident in Islam. And that would be fallacious, because if I debunk Scientology, Christianity, and Hinduism, that doesn't tell you anything at all about whether or not Islam is true. Just because other religions are not true doesn't mean yours is more true. So when you say that you heard me say things about Noah and the flood that made you more confident in Islam, we're both asking you, how the hell could that possibly make you more confident in something? It's like saying, I proved that the burglar wasn't the butler, and so now I'm more confident than ever that it was the maid. That's not how evidence works.
Okay, can I explain, sir? Can I explain?
Sure.
The story of the Noah and the flood is in the Quran as well. And I went and I read it again. I'm not taking this because you criticize the Christianity. I did not say that if the Christianity is wrong, so Islam is right. No, I went to the Quran and I read again, and I searched all the verses that talk about the flood of the Noah, and I did not see any word saying that this flood submerged the whole earth. So it just
what difference that make?
The story in the Quran makes sense.
No, stop. What you just said is that because you couldn't find a fault with the version of the story in the Quran, you believe it's true. But that's not the way reason works either.
What's your reason for needing a God? Why do you feel the need to have a God at all, whether it's the Christian God or the Muslim God? Why can't you be satisfied with just saying, you know what, there's no evidence for any God, so I'm fine without any gods? Why do you feel the need to have a God? Because it sounds like you do.
Yes, I do. Okay.
Why?
Although this is what I wasn't preparing myself to do this, but I believe there is, I believe in the intelligent design. I believe there is things in the is created. It could not be created by its own. And I will give you an example, sir. Something I practice every day, and I know. If we took an egg, a fertile egg, and we try to hatch it in nowadays, this will need to design a hatcher and incubator, an incubator and a hatcher to get this. We know that this been designed, but but this hatching of this chicken is done in the nature, in what you call it nature, by hormonal changes in the chicken and by sperm is coming from the male to the female.
I'm sorry, Ahmed, but that is not how eggs are hatched. If a fertilized egg comes from a chicken and you put it in a hatchery, or you could have the chicken set on it, or you could wrap it up in a heating pad with a blanket, anything to keep it warm and safe. It has nothing to do with you're citing hormones in the chicken. A fertilized egg is either going to hatch and grow to fruition under the right circumstances of heat, etc., or it's not.
Yes, but what makes the chicken lay on its egg and stay? This is hormonal changes happen to the chicken.
Okay.
There is a whole design. There is a whole physiology behind this.
No. You don't get to call that design. You have to prove that it's design. You have to prove the design. Otherwise, is there anything in nature that you don't think is designed by Allah?
No, I think everything is designed by Allah.
Right. Now, that means that you're walking around looking at... Now, stop. If you think everything was designed by Allah, then you don't get to cite, hey, this was designed and this wasn't. That means that there's no way to show to you that there's natural processes that don't require a God because you're presupposing a God.
Okay. Very good. I need a help from you. I need to ask you a question. When I can say that this thing is designed by a designer, what is the condition?
When you have evidence that shows that it was designed by a designer.
So if I'm driving my Toyota and I cannot bring that it was designed in a factory, and I don't have any paper to prove it was designed.
Oh my God! Stop! Every piece of evidence we have shows that cars are designed by designers and that cars do not occur naturally. We recognize design by contrasting that thing which is designed by that which occurs naturally. You don't have to be able to produce the document on your specific Toyota. We, as a society, already know this. We know that cars are designed. And you know how we know? Because they're contrasted. So, like, let's imagine that you walked along a river and you find a whole bunch of sticks and mud blocking up that river. Was that created by a beaver, or did it occur through natural processes of flood coming through and gathering up sticks and mud? Which one?
All right. You're making sense. But when I asked you this
I asked a question.
Well, you used a bad analogy, Ahmad, because we can go to the factory and watch a Toyota be produced. We can see it with our eyes. You can't go and see the earth created out of nothing. So your assumption that a God did it, and now your double assumption that the particular God that you were raised with did it is fallacious, as Matt says, and you can't prove it. You just want to believe it.
Okay.
And it's just better if you're just honest with yourself and everyone around you. I believe it because I want to believe it, instead of trying to prove something you can't prove.
Okay, your argument makes sense, but I'm still asking. When I asked it, Matt, what is the condition of anything that I can call it is a design? It is designed.
That you can prove it.
In an argument,
that you can prove it.
So in your thinking, the only way to prove or to say that this thing is designer is to have an evidence there was a designer that have a blueprint for it and
yes
for that.
Yes.
So the accuracy of the operation itself does not make you assume that this was designer. This is my question.
Correct. You don't get to assume. Correct. You do not get to assume design, because when you assume design, you could be wrong, because we are pattern recognition machines. And if you don't have evidence for design, but you just assume this design, you can be wrong. And then once you believe that, now you're going to be wrong about a whole bunch of other things as well. It doesn't have to be a person with a blueprint. When I was saying yes, I'm saying there needs to be actual evidence for design.
So the accuracy and the precise does not indicate
what accuracy, what size. We're talking about hatching a fucking egg. It happens to literally every egg-laying life on planet, and for the life forms that don't lay eggs, that have internal gestation, etc., it's the same process. It just takes place internally.
Yeah,
what accuracy?
We can talk about the Earth. We can talk about the Earth orbiting the sun, and it's accurate operation every year.
It's not accurate every year.
Precise and very accurate.
Everything's winding down. You're only looking at it in the short term. But if you're talking about how, you know, the Earth is at the right distance from the sun for life, well, congratulations. That's going to be true everywhere where there's life. Design.
Ahmed sadly doesn't understand what he's talking about. I think he's trying, and he seems to want to know, but he's just he's completely brainwashed into what he believes, and he just doesn't understand the point that Dave and Matt are making here. And the intelligent design thing is just such a weak argument.
Show me humans evolving on Pluto, where it's not possible based on nature. Then now you've got a freaking miracle.
All right.
I think, Ahmad, I go back to this, Ahmad. I mean, you believe because you want to believe, and you were raised in a certain faith tradition, and you've clung to that. You explored other things, and you came back to what you were comfortable with. And I think that's the bottom line. We're just saying that we don't see evidence for a God, any God. And I'm saying to you again, I feel like you simply want to believe there's a God for some reason. I'm telling you, you don't need to. Life can work just fine without being submitted to a God who gets to take credit for every good thing that happens in your life and gets to blame you for every bad thing that happens, by the way. But you can live life on your own without a God. And I encourage you to explore that idea, because I'm telling you, life makes a lot more sense. The chaotic, random nature of life makes a lot more sense when you don't try to attach a God to it. Because I've lived on both sides of that equation. So I would encourage you to explore life without the need for a God. That's my own thing.
Dave, you brought two things, and both of them are very good. The second thing that you brought, and I like it, that I need to pursue the life without a religion, and which I do already. I will deal with you not on a religious basis. I deal with if you are my neighbor, I will deal with you based on the good being of you and me and the whole neighborhood. So I do this already. So I have no problem. And the Islam telling me to do that with the people who does not believe in my religion and with the people who believe in my religion.
Really?
But
so
yes,
hang on.
Yes.
So what does the Quran say about non-believers?
It said in the Quran, two verses I will tell it to you in Arabic, and I will translate it. لا إكراه في الدين. There is no compulsion in religion. There is no enforcement in religion. فمن شاء فليؤمن ومن شاء فليكفر. Whoever choose to believe, he can believe, and whoever choose to not to believe, he cannot believe. And I can send you in your email not one verse, not two, not three, not four. I can send you tens of verses that telling me that I should not have any problem with you if you are atheist, Buddhist, or anything, as long as you are not fight me against me based that I'm a Muslim.
So
this is what
about Surah 2 verses 6 and 7? What's that say?
Surah 2 verses 6 and 7?
Yes.
ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للمتقين I cannot recall that, but I don't know what the verse you are talking about. I can open the Quran.
Why don't you read it to us?
Verses 2, the chapter 2, verses 6 and 7.
Yeah.
Could you give me a second? I will look it. I will look it up.
Well, what it says here in my English translation is it says, "Don't bother warning the disbelievers. Allah has made it impossible for them to believe, so that He can torture them forever after they die." So basically,
I know the translation. I know the translation is wrong.
Okay, well, then I'm going to move on because I don't have any way to confirm what the translation says or does. And so this is the problem. This is the problem. No, stop. This is the problem every time I have a conversation with a Muslim. They all want to say, oh, your English understanding of what that surah means is not what that surah means. And yet there's all kinds of things about mistreating women, about killing the infidels, and all kinds of other problems with Islam that have nothing to do with whether or not I disproved Noah's Ark. We're going to move on to other callers, Ahmed. Call us back another time.
I didn't.
Nope. I'm not going down.
It's all, well, not all Christians do. So that's why I.
Yes. Well, I was watching the documentary Expelled, and I was seeing all the ways that the atheists try to block arguments for intelligent design. And the one question I had is, where is the proof that do you know how many billions of people have been in the world and all these fossils? You don't have proof that those are a common ancestor between humans and apes. They could simply have been people with deformities.
Oh, gosh.
No, and actually I'd recommend that you go look up something having to do with genetics, because the fusing of chromosome 2 pretty much confirms common ancestry. And this is not even controversial. This is theists, particularly Catholics who don't have a problem with evolution. The science is already there. It's the science of common ancestry it's undeniable, and it doesn't just exist in the fossil record. By the way, you can't just say, oh, well, it's deformities, because these would be regular deformities that are also in the correct places in time. You don't find fossil rabbits in the Precambrian, and evolution as a science makes predictions about what we're going to find with intermediate forms. For example, Tiktaalik is something that we predicted. We knew exactly where to go look and in what layer of rocks to have the right time frame to have this particular thing, and it proves out. I'd recommend, actually going and studying the science rather than listening to, Expelled is a terrible documentary that is full of lies.
Terrible.
That doesn't have, this is not controversial in science. This is only controversial in the minds of a handful of fundagelicals.
And I know why. I get why it's a big issue, Helen, because if fundamentalists who believe in the fall of man and original sin with Adam and Eve, that God placed them in the garden, and because they were disobedient, then all of us inherit that original sin, that we're born sinners. And if you take that truth out, if you take that part of the gospel story out, there's no need for Jesus to die. There's no need for a savior. We're not in need of salvation. And so I get why Christians, why fundamentalists need to disprove evolution and need to cling to the biblical narrative of Adam and Eve and original sin. I understand the problem, but going against science and trying to make an alternative view of science doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't get us there.
Well, I think though that people are taking this and putting what they want onto it in order to try and disprove that there's a God.
Well, you're right. There are people taking this and putting what they want on it, and they're called fundamentalist Christians. The scientists who are actual experts in this, who've spent their lives studying it, many, many lifetimes, they're not putting what they want on anything. They're following the evidence where it leads. And the only thing that's ever corrected science is more science. So you can sit there as a non-expert and go, how do I know it's not just a bunch of humans with birth defects? And the scientists who study this can explain it to you, but you have to be willing to go listen to them and study the actual evidence rather than assuming the entirety of science is some sort of conspiracy cabal set to undermine your religion, which has no evidence for it at all. All of the evidence is with the scientists. None of the evidence is with religion. In the entire history of the world, the number of religious claims that have been disproved by science is staggering, and the number of science claims that have been disproved by religion is 0.
Well, what about Lucy, though?
What about Lucy?
Lucy.
What corrected Lucy?
Well,
Science.
Lucy, how do you know that she could not have been just a short woman who had a deformity at that time?
I am not a biologist, and I'm not going to go into the details, but that's not what the issue is with Lucy. You should go look it up, because there's a reason how we find out some things are hoaxes or some things were misunderstood. And that reason is never because Jesus said so. It's always because we did more scientific investigation.
Yeah, science is constantly fixing itself. That's the difference. Science is open to new ideas that will cause them to change their ideas about something. Religion starts with a fixed position and sets around trying to prove that. And then when science comes against that fixed position, then religion tries to figure out a way around the science. And that's what they've done with evolution. Wouldn't you agree, Helen, that the problem with evolution is that it takes away the original sin of the Garden of Eden?
Well, I think so, yes. And I think, like I said, that they're just projecting what they want onto it.
Well, Helen?
They have
No, like Matt said, they're following the science. The evidence proves it.
But so here's the thing. Do we have any evidence that the Garden of Eden story is true?
Well, what about the mitochondrial Eve?
Mitochondrial Eve is a constructed beginning of humans. It's not a single person that is the Eve in the biblical story. They used it because the Eve story is so popular that it makes sense. People are like, of all the humans who are alive, our last common ancestor is here. And by the way, that will shift. But what evidence do we have that the Garden of Eden story is true at all?
Well, I read in Time magazine that were there not fossils found around Mesopotamia? Or
Helen, are you afraid to answer the question that I've asked? Because I've asked repeatedly, what evidence do we have that the biblical story in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, is true? Doesn't matter what Life magazine says about fossils. How do you know that the biblical account of the Garden of Eden is true?
Well, how do I know? Because I know because I take it on faith, because God said.
Okay, there you go.
But
there you go. That's what it is. It's faith.
Is there any position
Helen,
that you couldn't take on faith? Because faith is the excuse people give when they don't have a good reason. If you have a good reason and evidence, you provide the good reason and evidence. And we don't have good reason and evidence, then you just say, I take it on faith. But you could take anything on faith. You could think white people are better than black people on faith, couldn't you?
No, and that's another thing is that you keep saying about slavery. Where does it say in the Bible that
Exodus 21, Leviticus 25?
We don't want to go down that road.
Does it say people of a certain skin color should be slaves?
No, it doesn't say people of a certain skin color, but what it says is you shall buy your slaves from the heathen that surround you, and that you can beat them as long as they don't die within a couple of days. Are you suggesting that slavery is only wrong if we make it about race? Are you suggesting that it's okay to own people as property as long as they're the same race as us?
Well, I'm suggesting.
Why are you so no? I asked about the fucking Garden of Eden, and you offer nothing.
What?
And then I point out how we're the various issues here, and when you're like, oh well, you always mention slavery. Yes. Do you think slavery is immoral, Helen? Do you think it's immoral to own people?
I think that at that time God knew the flaws of mankind, and he was setting down regulations that if they were going to.
I think you're making shit up so that you don't have to acknowledge the truth, because the truth is owning people as property is fucking immoral, and the fact that you can't say that should be an embarrassment.
Well, Helen, I think the reality.
He knows.
Helen, you said it with your own mouth. You want to take it on faith. And I don't know why, and Matt and I talked about this earlier in the show, I don't know why Christians go to such great lengths to try to prove something that doesn't have sufficient evidence, when at the core of everything, it's just, I take it on faith. I just have faith because the Bible says it. And you have to understand, Helen, I used to believe that. And in terms of morality, I mean, I don't know why you got off on slavery. I don't know why you want to talk to Matt about slavery, because you don't want to do that. Trust me. But the idea of Adam and Eve and original sin, I want to ask you this about morality. Do you think it's moral to hold another person responsible for someone's sins, to use a religious word, or someone's wrongdoings from generations before? Do you think it's okay morally for you to be responsible for something your great-great-grandfather did?
Well, does God say that it is?
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you what you think.
The sins of the father shall be carried out to the 4th generation or the 10th generation, depending on which verse it goes to. And also, according to 1 Timothy 2, you're not allowed to teach or have authority over a man. Are you okay with that?
I asked you, Helen, I asked you, do you think it's moral? I'm asking you.
Yes.
You think it's okay?
Moral if God thinks it's moral.
We don't know what God thinks.
Why do you even...
Show me what God thinks. How do we know what God thinks?
Well,
the Bible, Matt.
It says
prove that the book accurately represents what God thinks.
Well, where does the seed come from? Do you
That's not Helen. Every time I get you to the point where you are
all over the map,
instead of answering the question, you jump to something else. Prove that the Bible represents what God thinks.
Well, how can you prove it doesn't? And if
I don't have to prove it doesn't. Can you prove that the Quran doesn't speak for God? How about the Bhagavad Gita? Can you disprove all the other holy books that you don't believe in?
Well, you can look at there and see that there is not a savior. There's not someone who died.
No, that's not relevant. That's not relevant, whether or not there's a savior.
Helen.
It's not. That's only because you're assuming Christianity is true.
Helen, can you prove there's not a Harry Potter? Helen, do you think there's a person that lived in history named Harry Potter, a real person?
Is that book purporting to be the true word of anything, or is that?
It doesn't matter. It's a book. Helen, it's a book. Can you believe it's not true? Can you prove it's not true?
Because can I prove it's not true?
Can you prove it's not true? Can you prove there's no Harry Potter?
Okay. Well, was there a prophet, J.K. Rowling, that said Harry Potter existed? And
Helen, if you're not going to argue honestly, we're going to move on.
Just admit you want to take it on faith and quit trying to prove it, because you're embarrassing yourself. Really, you are. Just admit you want to take it on faith.
I did say, sir, there were fossils discovered around Mesopotamia.
What the hell does that have to do, Helen?
Because that would be where the Bible says the Garden of Eden was.
No, it doesn't. The Bible doesn't say where the Garden of Eden is, which is why the Mormons think it's in fucking Missouri. You don't know your Bible is the problem. You don't know your Bible.
She's listening.
And you don't know science.
Let me just ask you this, though. If we were created, if there was an intelligent designer, would he not be a supreme being? Would he not know what's good for us?
I don't know, because I don't know what is possible to create. Is it possible that there's other aliens that created us? What on earth? But first of all, that's a big if, because you're assuming if we're created, then it was by a God. But you can't even show that we were created.
Helen, the previous caller said that
anything but God.
Helen, the previous caller, was arguing for an intelligent designer, and that caused him to believe it was the God of Islam. So how's he wrong?
Well, I just mentioned, because there is no savior in Islam who sacrificed himself.
Why is that relevant? Why is that relevant to the truth?
You can't prove that. You can't prove that happened.
But hang on. If you're going to disqualify Islam because you say there's no savior in it, where did the criteria for a savior come from, Helen?
Where did the criteria for a savior come from? Well, there had to be a perfect sacrifice in order.
No.
for mankind
All of
to
what
be
you're spewing right now, Helen, is Christian doctrine. You don't get to assume Christianity is true in order to say Islam is false. That is fallacious.
I don't think she understands.
Because it shows that religion does not teach self-sacrifice, which is key to Christianity.
I get it. First of all, it doesn't matter if it's the key to Christianity. What matters is whether or not it's true.
You're assuming Christianity is the true religion. He's assuming the Muslim is the true religion. So who's wrong?
The Muslims, the atheists, the Buddhists, anyone who's not a Christian.
How do you prove that?
Right.
How do you prove that?
How do I prove that? I know because it says in the Bible. I know because Jesus is knocking at the door of both of your hearts every day.
Do you realize that you're talking to? Do you realize, Helen, that you're talking to two former Christians, one ex-minister and one who was going to be a minister?
Helen, I used to preach this stuff. I read the Bible back and forth, through and through, several times, cover to cover.
We're asking you how to show that your beliefs are true, and you are coming with absolutely nothing.
Just admit you want to take it on faith. Just admit. I mean, you've got nothing.
Again, I said in Mesopotamia is where the
No, it doesn't. The Bible does not say where the Garden of Eden is. It's specifically hidden. I'm sorry that you don't know your Bible any better than you know science. But we're asking you how you know something is true. And even if the Bible had said the Garden of Eden is Mesopotamia, and even if the earliest answers that we could trace back were in Mesopotamia, that would not prove that the Bible is true and that God is real. That's not how that works. You need to be able to demonstrate that the religion you believe is in fact true. Works. How do you do that?
It would be some evidence towards that, though, wouldn't it?
Well, yes, and we're asking for the evidence that shows that your beliefs are true.
All you've given us is what the Bible says. No, Helen, the Bible is not evidence. It's just not. You can't use the Bible to prove the Bible. It's circular reasoning, and you can't seem to or don't want to acknowledge that. And I'm just saying you'd be better off to just admit that you want to believe because it makes you feel good and just move on and don't try to prove it. Just don't. Just don't.
I'd actually disagree with Dave a little bit. I'd love for you to keep trying to prove it because not here on the show, but the more you keep trying to prove it, the more likely it is you'll come to the same realization that we did. Because once upon a time, Dave and I both believed the same things that you do pretty much. And we thought we had good reason. And when we sought to prove the truth of this, I'm an atheist because I set out to be the best Christian I could be, because I didn't want to get to heaven and have God say, hey, why is your roommate who you love like a brother burning in hell? Because you did not share the truth of the scripture and you did not allow the Holy Spirit to turn his heart. And so I sat to look for a way to confirm that my beliefs were true. And you know what? I found out that I didn't have a good reason, and neither does anybody else. It's not just you. You have no expertise in this at all, Helen. I debate accomplished theologians, people with books thicker than I could possibly read. And they don't have any better arguments than you do. They just sound better because they've learned how to obfuscate and hide the fact that they don't have good reasons. You haven't figured out how to hide that yet. And I hope you never do. I hope you keep searching to find out a way to prove me wrong. Prove there's a God. Because every step you take down that path brings you closer and closer to the realization that you don't know your book, you don't understand how to prove this, and you don't have a good reason. Every reason you've given just comes back to your assumption that Christianity is true. Islam's false because it doesn't have a savior. Well, who the hell said a savior makes something true? Nobody.
Well, Jesus is knocking at the door of your heart every day.
Prove it.
Oh my God.
I'm so tired. If Jesus wants to say something to me, he should fucking show up himself instead of sending you. Oh, and she hung up. Jesus is knocking at your door.
She just wanted to get the last word in. Yeah. She wanted. I think she's one of those people who think that God gives her some kind of stars in her crowns in her. Yeah. In her whatever jewels in her crown because she calls in and tries to convert a couple of atheists. So
I'll just address.
You just Joshua in Idaho. If you can get to this quickly, I will try to take your call. Otherwise, I'd rather you just call back on another week.
No, I'll just address it real quick, and then I'll hang up and let you guys discuss it on the air.
Okay, thanks.
So earlier in the show, you guys stated something that there's no way to investigate evidence for God.
Well,
I think he's referring to investigating the resurrection.
Yeah, there's no way for me to investigate the resurrection. If there's a God currently existing, then there may be a way for us to investigate that. I just don't know what it is, because that God would need to kind of show up in some way that's detectable.
Right, and I can agree with you on that. I wouldn't say that I'm a practicing Christian or anything, because I'm far from it. But I'll let me see if I can compare a little bit about this. So let's say that the Bible itself is an alleged book of historical events that allegedly took place.
Yes, and there are hang on, Josh, it's real easy. There's a bunch of things in the Bible that I have no problem believing are real, and there are other things in the Bible that require more than just a claim. Like I can agree
with you on that.
Yeah. So if we say, hey, this person existed and got in a fight with this other person, okay, I'm fine with that. If you say this person walked on water, I need more than a claim.
Right, okay. I could agree with you on that. So saying it would be completely obtuse to say that George Washington was a president, as in saying a guy churned water into wine.
Yeah, those two things are very different. And one of the ways that we know these things is that some historical accounts, you have information from the people who were opposed to it. So it's not all coming from one side. So we know George Washington was president because not only do we have current historians who lived at the time writing, but we have some of George Washington's writings, and we have people talking about what he did that was good and what he did that was bad and what they liked and what they disliked. It would be absurd to say that George Washington was an invented fiction. On the other hand, you don't know that for Moses. Moses, all of the things about Moses read like storybook fiction. A babe put into the water, rescued by a pharaoh, raised in a position of privilege, and then chosen by God, but he can't speak, so he has his brother speak for him, and then he goes and he does magic tricks for Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's magicians can do the same tricks, and then there's plagues and all this. Right. None of that reads like real or true. So I have no reason to think that Moses ever existed.
He recorded or how he documented his own death.
Well, that one's easy. I would be fine with the notion that one person, even Moses, may have written a good chunk of that, and then somebody else added his death to the end of the book. That is a weaker argument from atheists, in my view. But the thing is, when we look at all the things about Moses' life, there's nothing there that we can confirm that sounds like a real person. It all sounds like
fiction,
fantasy,
a fable. Yeah,
I get it. Yeah, I get it. And, I mean, like I said, I know you guys are tapped for time now. And this is the first time I've actually ever been able to call into your show and talk to you, Matt. I mainly listen to the other Matt. What's his name?
The other Matt?
Carm.
There's another Matt.
Matt Slick? You're talking about Matt Slick? Well, send him a message.
I listen to him when he...
Maybe call.
I gotta let you go, Josh.
More time, Josh.
I gotta let you go, but call me back another week and send Matt Slick a message, because I just talked to him a couple weeks ago, or a month or so ago, I think it was. But yeah. All right. I want to do this one really quickly. Jason in Tennessee, how are you?
Yeah. Hey, Matt and Dave.
Hey, Jason.
Again. This is my second time to call.
Yeah.
Hey, sorry, Matt, by the way, last time I called, I didn't realize you were talking. It was the other host I thought was talking, so I did not mean to ignore you. But to get to my questions, do you mind if I tack on a couple of questions real quick to that conversation with the lady you had about the Garden of Eden and slavery real quick? I know that's kind of a change, but it'll be quick.
No. Yes, I do mind. We're already over time. It says here you had a question about whether or not visibility is a requirement for a God to exist. And my answer is no, and it has nothing to do with divine hiddenness, because that's not about visibility, that's about detectability. The air in front of me is generally not visible, but it is absolutely detectable, and as soon as it goes away, I can detect it. And, The fact is, what you need to have is a God that is detectable in some way. That's it.
Right. So do you mind if I respond, please?
Sure.
Okay. So if we talk about detectability or the visibility of the God, there's a couple of things that we know in science, for example, that we would say we observe the effects of. And Christians would say, I observe the effects of prayer, right? But they can't demonstrate the visibility or the presence of God, because God would be a sentient being with a free will of his own.
They're not.
To you is this.
When somebody says they're observing the effects of prayer, that's what they believe is happening, but that's not what's happening. They'd have to demonstrate that they're observing the effects of prayer.
Okay, so let me ask you a question then, Matt. Follow up real quick, because I know you're familiar with Christian theology. Okay,
some of it.
This would tie into the discussion of slavery real quick. Is the topic of the immorality, or what you would say is the immorality of slavery, is that a defeater for the existence of a Christian God?
No. First of all, when we say the existence of a Christian God, there's more than one Christian God. Can we at least understand that?
Okay,
that
let's
there are
talk about King James Bible version.
Well, so it doesn't matter which Bible version. There are different characters to God depending on what you read and how you interpret it. I mean, is God jealous? Well, it literally says so, but that doesn't make sense. So maybe we should be understanding that metaphorically instead of, that God's actually jealous. So when you talk about the character of God, is God cruel at all? Well, I would argue that the God of the Bible actively does many things that are cruel in the Bible. For example, even telling Abraham to kill Isaac was cruel to both Abraham and to Isaac. Doesn't matter how it turned out in the end, but it was cruel to both of them.
Okay. What he did to Job's family was cruel.
My question is this, though. I'm sorry.
Well, Jason, just to cut in there, because we are over time, but as Matt was saying, a lot of Christians argue against the Old Testament God. They don't like to talk about the angry father, but they want to talk about nice Jesus. And like a lot of Christians kind of present a picture.
I don't mind it.
Two different gods there, the God of the Old Testament, the God of the New Testament. But I think you're diverting a little bit. I want to go back to what you originally said you were calling in about with the detectability of God or the visibility of God. My point with that is, it's regardless of whether we could see the effects of God, if there's a God out there who is watching this 2,000-year debate about his existence, and he wants there to be some kind of answer about this, and he wants people to know him, if he wants people to really know him, if that's the idea behind all of this, that he wants fellowship with his creation, then why didn't he show up? Why didn't he just fucking prove himself? He can do it, right? Why all this mystery and invisibility and all of this stuff? Well, give me a great answer.
All right, great question, Dave. Can I respond, please?
Yes.
I know you're pressed for time. That's why I don't mean to be rude.
No, you're fine.
If God were to come down, if God were to come down from heaven to earth, according to like what you would say in Revelation with Christ, if God were to physically demonstrate himself, would that lead to the conclusion that everybody would choose to worship him?
No.
Because
he would at least he would prove that he exists. Now, if he proved that he exists and he's the God of the Bible, I want nothing to do with him. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
But at least he would.
Exactly.
At least he would. So, what's the point?
Well, the point would be that if God already had an ordained plan of how he wanted to carry out salvation, and you're saying God needs to physically demonstrate or prove himself, you're saying you still would not follow that God, and therefore the same result would still happen. You would still end up in the same place according to Christian theology, correct?
Jason, that's not true for everybody.
There are people with open hearts.
You can prove to me that there's a king, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to swear fealty to the king. I might not. And if God, but no. You say, what's the point? Because Dave said if he's the actual God of the Bible, then he's not going to follow him. But that's the thing. If the God is a monster, nobody should be following or worshiping him. If the God is advocating for slavery and war, and women don't matter as much as men, if at all, That's not a God that I would want to follow, but I would definitely want to know that he existed. So the point of showing that he existed is so that you can stop calling into atheist shows, because atheists are now just flatly rejecting what we know to be true. And now all of a sudden this show goes away, and every reasonable excuse that people have for saying, I just don't believe it, all of that goes away. Now the reprobate are truly reprobate.
Then everybody can make up their mind based upon evidence. People can make up their mind based upon what they know of this God. It's kind of like the last election. People can look at Trump and go, he's a fucking monster, but I'm still going to vote for him. And that's the way they would do with God.
And you're basically arguing at this point, why should God bother? He already knows who is and isn't going to believe him, and he's fine with it. Well, cool. Then he's a dick.
Well, that's not necessarily what I'm saying. What I am saying is that you both have demonstrated or said before, and I don't mean to take it out of context, that you would not follow this Christian God.
I would not worship a God. I probably wouldn't worship any God. But if there's a God that exists and he shows himself to me, and we're able to actually say, oh, okay, you are a God and you're a good God, all of a sudden that changes my mind, doesn't it? But clearly your God is fucking terrified of showing himself to me or anybody else in history.
So according to this is why I was tying into the slavery point, and I promise I'll be punctual and then I'll get off your space. I know you guys are busy. The question is really quick. When I've heard the conversations about slavery, and I know it usually goes south, the question is, what morality standard are you using if the Bible says that God is the standard?
Mine. I don't care if the Bible's. I've already answered this question about 500,000 times. I'm using my standard, which is that it's based primarily on well-being. And what's really a problem here, Jason, is that I bet you agree with me. I bet you agree that it is immoral to own people as property and beat them as long as they don't die within a couple days.
My response to that would be, would I say in current society that it would be abhorrent or vulgar to me or distasteful? I would absolutely agree. For me,
well, that's the slimiest way out, because you've excluded the past. I'm saying it was immoral in the past and in the present and in the future. And not just distasteful.
But if God defines morality in the Bible,
He doesn't.
Be a hypocrite as a Christian. Not
he doesn't. You have no evidence that there is a God. You don't know what God thinks about anything. All you know is what the Bible says, and you are willing to sacrifice your humanity on the altar of a book that you can't prove.
Hey, Jason, forget slavery a minute. Do you believe?
Yes, sir.
Do you believe the story of Lot as recorded in the Bible?
I wouldn't know whether it's a parable or a true story, so I'm not sure. I can
well,
go either way, but for your
the writers of the New Testament called him righteous Lot, so they believed it, apparently.
Okay.
And if that's true, let's assume that really happened. Was it moral of Lot to offer his daughters to the men of Sodom, to do with as they pleased? Righteous Lot.
I know. I'm trying to think of a good way to respond, because I know that anyway.
There's not one.
There's not
one.
This is the embarrassing thing. This is the reason why. One. This is why Dave and I gave this shit up, and it's absolutely embarrassing to watch decent people. Because I think you're probably a wonderful person, Jason, but you are willing to tie yourself in knots.
You too, Matt.
You are willing to tie yourself in knots and embarrass yourself publicly on sacrificing your humanity and all sense of decency, just so that you don't dare say maybe the Bible's not right about something.
Jason, a lot of times people ask me,
if I said that or believe that, it'd be hypocritical of me.
Well, it is if you're going to maintain
How could
Christianity.
I be a professing Christian? Sorry,
you don't have
That's
to
the
be.
point. Stop being a
You don't
professing
have to be.
Christian. Stop trying to defend
People
shit that
ask
is
me-
indefensible.
People
Right, Dave,
ask
I'm
me all
sorry.
the time, why'd you leave Christianity? And my one-line answer, I've reduced it to this: I got tired of making excuses for God's poor behavior. And once you do that, once you come to that place, Jason, it will set you free. You don't have to defend
Do you
God
believe that context
anymore.
matters, though, when you're talking about morality? Context.
No, No, because it was immoral for those people.
Context never mattered.
No, my position is that all morality is situational. But if you're going to say that it was okay to own people's property, please describe how and why that situation is moral.
As I was trying to say earlier, and I promise you I'm not trying to be slimy or slippery, do I find it distasteful as I would cannibalism? Yes. I'm not in disagreement with you that it seems abhorrent to me. My mind, though, says that there are things that exist that if I were to say that, yes, it seems distasteful, could I prove it's immoral if I'm defining my own set of morality? Because your standard, my standard, whoever's standard, how would we say that we're right? Because you know that there's several people out there, society.
Yet you're willing to say that a God you cannot prove is right. You don't know what God says at all. You don't know what God thinks at all. You are willing to throw away the best standard that you and I could ever agree on, which is the well-being of thinking creatures. You're willing to chuck that away just because you're terrified of the prospect that maybe the God you believe in isn't real. That's sad.
No, I'm terrified of the prospect of if somebody else were to define morality and they're saying whose well-being that they're out there for, everybody's going to draw a circle around what they think is right.
Yes. And you know how we solve that, Jason? Jason, do you know how we solve that problem?
Taking a popular vote?
No. We do it through discussion and debate. You know how we can never solve that problem? By pointing to a holy book and saying this book's right. That will never solve it. There's not a single problem with my secular moral system that is in any way solved by your belief in a God. Not one.
Okay, can I point out one example, and then I promise I know you're restricted for time. I'm sorry to eat up your time. If we talk about bodily autonomy, because I know the discussion of abortion has been a sore point, and I'm not trying to go there to cause hurt feelings. If we talk about bodily autonomy, how do you feel about mandating that people should get the COVID vaccine then?
That's not bodily autonomy issue. See, one of the things is that nobody's mandating that you need to get the vaccine.
That's a societal issue.
So this is one of those things where we are doing something and putting guidelines in place to protect all of us. You can refuse. You just don't get to go out and interact with other people.
Okay,
that's it.
I was simply asking your feelings if you think people should be forced to get the vaccine.
No, but here's
if
the
they
deal,
want to interact
Jason,
with other
you wanted
people.
To go to, if you wanted to go to a restaurant that had a sign up that said no shoes, no shoes, no shirts, no service.
Yeah.
And you didn't have a shirt on, are you saying they're forcing you to wear shirts? No, only if you want to come in their restaurant. It's not complicated.
I agree with that, and I respect going into any place that requires a mask. I'm not saying be an a-hole. All I'm saying is if somebody were to come back and say, I think everybody should be forced to wear a mask or get a vaccine, then to me, you can't turn around and then say that, well, abortion is strictly should always be allowed because then
Jason, you should have stopped a few minutes ago because now you're really fucking embarrassing and way off track on a subject that we don't have time to go into. Because forcing someone to carry a child to term when they don't want to is not in anything at all like saying no mask, no vaccine card, no service. Those are two, like, it's not even the same fucking ballpark. I'm going to hang up so that you don't make yourself look worse, but thank you. Call back another
Jason.
time and we'll get into that. That's
oh
it,
my
Dave.
God. It was like he had a list of Christian talking points. He hit all of them in one call.
Absolutely awful. Wow.
I just want to say, oh no, and then slavery, and then abortion.
No
and
more
then,
science.
It's frustrating for me, and I get it. And there's other ways. By the way, there's many different ways to.
Had to be hypocritical. Let go. Love you, buddy.
Okay, right. I'm shooting to the end there because it's just this kind of sum up. And I've just muted it. So once again, it's interesting that the last 3 weeks now, there hasn't really been much on science. So anybody that's watching this and you're kind of looking for the scientific input here, I'm really sorry. I can only respond to obviously what's being said. So I hope that was good, and remember to stay safe, stay healthy, and if you want an idea about what a good kind of theme for life would be in your life, then maybe consider the idea that every day you should try and help somebody in their life, make their life better than it would be if you weren't there. Did that come over right? Try and do good. And love your parents. Take care.